get a handshake from Twitch.
Okay.
Waiting for the handshake. There's the handshake.
Oh, good.
Now I'm going to get a handshake from YouTube. There's the handshake. Now we go to Facebook, and Facebook is asking me to put in the name of the show, which I'm going to do, and what it's about, which I did. And now Facebook said they're ready when you're ready. Flip the switch. Put the clapper in front of your face. When you hit the clapper, you are on the air.
Great. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future. Thanks to our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. Thanks. And also thanks to our friends at WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station coming out of Buff State. So thank you, WBNY and Buff State. And thanks make me think of our Indigenous friends, which I was just with some of our very dear Indigenous friends, and how they always manage to be thankful, no matter how much violence and oppression they've already experienced. They start their days with thankfulness, all their meetings with thankfulness that runs from everyone who is there, that's make it possible, to Mother Earth, to all of the living waters that make life possible, that all the plants, nutritional and medicinal, the trees, the creatures of all kinds, and all of the different elements in the creation, and of course the love and the instructions from the Creator that we should be following if we want life to continue in this creation. So then they say Nyahweh, and then the people say Nyo. So Nyahweh.
Nyo.
Thank you. So I'm very grateful today for the show we're going to do. We're calling it Needed Frank Conversations, and so we have our special guest here, Zeneta Everhart, who, as we were just talking about, has been in the news plenty because she is, well, what can I say, all fired up and ready to go about the changes that we need in this community. So Zeneta, as the mom of Zaire Goodman, who was shot in the Buffalo Massacre and survived, miraculously survived, who is the Diversity and Inclusion Officer, is that right? For Senator Tim Kennedy. Zeneta, we're just so honored and grateful that you've joined us.
Thank you for having me, Vicki. Thank you, Deidra, and of course, West New York Peace Center. Thank you for having me.
And of course, Deidra needs no introduction, being the executive director at the Western New York Peace Center and all the other things you do, your lifelong activism in the community. Deidra, we're so grateful.
Love, and thank you, Zeneta, for coming on with us, honoring us with your presence. So I'm happy to be here.
And I didn't say I'm Vicki Ross. I'm just grateful to be here, grateful to be doing this radio show and be with these two wonderful leaders in the community. And so sometimes we like to start off by thinking about values that we bring into this conversation. And so if we're thinking about the need for frank conversations, any particular value or aspect that you want to highlight before we start about that?
I'll let you go, Zeneta.
Of course, I'll go first. For me, I think I'm just going to start with, being grateful. I'm blessed and grateful, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think that I want to bring to the circle openness and acceptability, of truths. The acceptability of truths, to have that those willing hearts and minds to be movable and pliable and changeable, to understand what's happening and what needs to happen, and to be willing to change for the better.
So it's so beautiful what both of you have shared. And of course, as I said, I was just with a number of Indigenous friends. Dr. Hillary Weaver is stepping down at UB School of Social Work. But anyway, and we have I have learned so much from our Indigenous friends, and they do go counterclockwise like that. But the other thing is about that overriding gratefulness that you mentioned, and of course truth and love that Deidra mentioned. But the other thing that I would mention that was mentioned by one of our Indigenous friends in a recent show about Indigenous Peoples Day, humility. Humility. And I want to say, I especially bring that in. You know, I think that for people who have experienced privilege, as I have, for people who have been encouraged to use their voice, maybe from the day one, that not using the voice, or just that humility of knowing how much we don't know, the so very much that needs to be learned, that the things, you know, I think of Agnes Williams, another Indigenous friend, who says, you know, she says, all the things that I'll never know. And then I added to that, you know, in the Ganonyo, because the Ganonyo can go on for days even sometimes, right? Or at least for a long time, for hours, even for 20 minutes, people are like, you're still doing it? But then there's the thing of, what I think, the things I think I know that I'm wrong about, you know, things like that. The things that we think we're learning, that we keep trying to learn, and we still don't get them through our head. So that makes me bring in humility. So, yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah.
Well, I'm borrowing it from, you know, because we're always on somebody else's shoulders too. So, So anyway, so from there, if we start with Buffalo before the massacre, and sort of what were some of the things that we might have needed to talk about before at that time that didn't get talked about as much as they might have. You know, maybe if we start with that, sort of underlying pre-massacre. What were the things, some of the conversations that should have been being had that haven't been had, or hadn't been had, or not in enough depth or whatever?
Right, and you know, I'll jump in there.
Yeah, please.
And so, you know, we're talking before 5/14, but you know, we can even talk before COVID, right?
Because, sure.
The COVID-19 pandemic kind of brought to light a lot of the issues on the east side of Buffalo, right? And which, you know, we like to call the social determinants of health, right? And all those issues have, you know, plagued the east side of Buffalo forever. And we're talking, you know, access to employment and access to education and, you know, food, right? Food insecurities. And we're talking, you know, housing. And I know when we think about health, we don't necessarily think about housing, you know, but where we live determines, you know, our livelihood and how long we live. And those are things that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then, of course, obviously, the terrorist attack on 5/14. And so, you know, these are issues, and let me say this, these aren't issues that are just Buffalo issues, right?
Right.
There are east sides of Buffalo all across the country. And so Black communities all across America have the same issues. And so therefore, you know, we have to put a spotlight on that, and we have to say, so what are we doing about that? If it's not just a Buffalo problem and it's an American problem, then we need real solutions. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So well put.
Agreed. And I think that as far as conversations before, I think that, I guess I would say more so, you know, conversations between who is also relevant
Sure.
to the conversation, to this present conversation, because I think that 514 really just kind of, you know, was a catalyst, or just blew the roof off of, excuse my language, like just the crap inside, you know, like you know, this cesspool, you know, of you know, oppression, degradation. You know, it just blew the roof off so it can be seen nationally, internationally. You know, what's going on in so many you know, cities around the country, and especially around the Rust Belt, as they say. You know, where there's, you know, lack of jobs, and, you know, where the industry and so on used to be here, and so on. And so I think that the conversations between different races, so-called, and ethnic groups, and economic classes needed to have been had already. So, you know, so all of a sudden, you know, oh my gosh, you know, this is a racial issue. No, it's just a racial issue in our faces. But as we know, you know, in the North, you know, in the North Country, in Buffalo, we said that racism was always here. It's just presented differently. Through different nuances that anyone has grown up here, that's, you know, from the Black community, or describes themselves, you know, as a African American citizen, they would start to recognize the nuances of racism in Western New York. And so this just enlightened the rest of the world. And I would just say it reminds me of the of, you know, George Floyd, you know, situation, for example, that, you know, whether people believe how much police brutality or less, or whatever, it happens. And, but people did not believe it existed the way it existed until it was on camera, the way it was on camera. So now it's oh my gosh, this is what's happening to us now. Everybody, every ethnicity and so on is in the streets. And I appreciate that, you know, being a part of the, you know, Black community. However, this is something that's been happening since the patty rollers and runaway slaves. Right. You know what I'm saying? I mean, right. I'm just saying, you know, like, those are the frank conversations, you know, part of that we need to look at and discuss historically on with multi-ethnic and multiracial groups in the same room, and to be educated of what's happening now, because it didn't just it wasn't just a starburst. You know, it's a culmination of. So it didn't just happen in a vacuum. So yeah, I want to see I want to see different groups have a conversation together and really hear each other. Because many of us have been miseducated or not educated at all on what's happening historically and today.
Deidra, you know what? And you know, following 514, as you all know, I went to DC and I testified.
Yes.
About exactly what you were just saying, Deidra. You know, the problems of, you know, domestic terrorism didn't start with 514 in Buffalo, New York on Jefferson Avenue, right?
Right.
Domestic terrorism is something that my ancestors have dealt with since they came here, right?
Right.
And this country was founded on domestic terrorism, and causing trauma to Black and brown people, the indigenous people, right? Starting with the indigenous people, and then with my ancestors, and so this isn't something that we can just say, oh, it happened on May 14, 2022. It didn't. It happened hundreds of years ago. And yes, we need to have truthful conversations around that. And we have to fix our education system and the curriculum schools across this country. And we need to talk about those things, because the terrorist that came into my community and caused terror, right? He was not educated properly, right? If you read his manifesto, you can, he's talking about this great replacement theory. And it's like, you're an immigrant, right? Let's talk about that. This isn't your country. So it literally makes no sense. And it boggles my mind how anyone can say that, the great replacement theory is a real thing when this isn't their country. This isn't even my country. It's my country because this is where my ancestors were brought to, right? And that's it. We are all immigrants here. This is not our homeland.
I think about...
This belongs to us.
Yes.
That's right.
It makes me think about, I keep talking about these indigenous friends, to talk about, the People's History of the United States, reading that book. What an eye-opener. So that's the real history that kids in school are not learning of, the just massive violence and brutality that was visited on indigenous people who initially welcomed. In fact, I think of one time when I asked a friend, an indigenous friend, to do the welcome for an event we had in Niagara Square. And she said, well, we welcomed you all when you first came here. We'll never do that again.
And
that's still how that worked out, Anyway, she was just joking. She did do it. But
you know what, Vicki, she's right, though,
she's right, yes.
This country, we act like, and again, I will say, we act like violence in this country started on May 14th, between Black and white people. Like, it didn't start.
1492.
1492. This country is built on violence. Like I said in my statement to Congress, America is inherently violent. It is who we are as a country and as a nation. And we have to stop acting like these mass shootings are just, it just happened. This isn't who we are as a country. This is literally who we are. This is what we teach people. And that's clear in that manifesto that the terrorists put together. That this is what you teach people, that violence is okay, and the way to solve the problem is to kill off Black and brown people. That is the story that you told since the inception of this country. So what do we think is going to happen? We're perpetuating it as a country. And when we're not speaking out about it, then we're allowing that to happen, and we're saying that that's okay.
Right.
That's right. And I think that, like you said, one, when we speak up against it or about it, it's like that's happening to you. But what people are not realizing is how much is happening within their own homes that's affecting how their children, how their, whoever is coming from their home out, how they interact with the world. I've worked with young, children, and I've even heard just recently, like how young children encounter one another. And then you have this racial slurs or situations because they have never encountered, Black and brown children. They have never had to experience them. Now they remember from what their parents said or grandparents have said. And now they are, trying to connect the dots, but they have been miseducated, as well.
Right.
And you know what? I was at an event last week, Deidra, And I spoke to a young woman, a young white woman, sweet girl. Oh my goodness, she's so sweet. And you know, she's like, I come out into the city because I really just, you know, she's from like, you know, rural Buffalo, basically. And she's like, you know, she had never even met a Black person until she went to college. And then I told her that I had literally just spoken to someone about that. And I said, you know, racism perpetuates because people keep their families and their children in these bubbles, right?
Right.
They never send them outside of those bubbles. They never go anywhere outside of those bubbles. And then when it comes time for them to go to college, they send them to Buff State. That's a problem, right? Like you can't do that. You know, that is, and she was saying that, you know, she had a hard time, you know, developing herself with the culture, right? And she had such a hard time, you know, she sought therapy and things like that. And she got, you know, a really good network of friends in the city of Buffalo and things like that. And I was so proud of her, you know, for that, you know, just reaching out to people to talk about, like, you know, how do I talk to my family? Like, she's like, these are the things that I'm doing now. And, you know, she's like, I just want to talk to my family about, like, you know, Black people aren't what we've seen on TV or in the movies or things like that.
Right.
And that's so problematic. That is how we keep racism going, is raising our families in these bubbles where they never see anybody else that looks differently.
Well, that, back to the extreme, so when we were talking about Buffalo and the problems in Buffalo, the extreme segregation that we have had, that one of the reasons, you know, I mean, out of the, you know, having the strength and resilience and beauty of the Black community here because of the extreme racism and segregation. But it's this weird thing where, back to what you said, it's because of the segregation and the poverty that the issues are so prominent. But that people are not integrating. We aren't an integrated city. And so I finally realized, you know, when I think it was, I don't know if it was before or when after the massacre, and when they kept saying over and over again, city of good neighbors, city of good neighbors. And I realized, oh, well, now I get it. It's a city of good neighbors because my neighbors are white. And if you're Black, your neighbors are Black. And so people are the city of good neighbors because we're this, no. You know, and this is what we know. Diversity and inclusion. This is why it was selected. This is why Buffalo was selected, because here it goes so deep, especially because of being like one of the endpoints of the Underground Railroad might have been part of it. You know, back to the strength and and also the strength on, I'll say both sides, on the sort of the white supremacist side of, like, this is the last chance to sort of snag the people, right? So that people were coming to Buffalo to get people before they made the great leap over the river somehow. Some kind of way, right? So do you think that's, you know, that's factoring into where we are in Buffalo?
I think absolutely. You know, when we think about the history of African Americans in this country, and I'll call them, you know, bounty hunters. Let's call them that.
Right.
You know, out looking for slaves, right? People like the terrorists who attacked the grocery store in Jefferson on 514, you know, he has that same type of mindset, right? That he's helping his country, right? Like, he thinks that, you know, so yeah, there is a correlation from our past and what Black Americans have been through. It's striking to me that people don't see those correlations, and I don't know. Again, it boggles my mind that people don't see the types of correlations to where, you know, the Great Replacement theory, or whatever you want to call it, is the same thing as, you know, the slave hunters.
Right.
they think they're accomplishing the same thing. They're helping their country, right?
But it's that fear and prejudice. So it's that and that classism that factors in too.
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. I think that's something that we see it in existence, but I don't think we really understand its depth. Like how deep it really goes, even beyond racism. Racism is a disease of classism. It's something that was used as a tool to separate the poor.
Right.
At one point, you had black and white poor here in 1600s that, trying to get out of servitude, they rebelled together, black and whites together, rebelled against the rich landowners, but they began to separate us. You're not like them. You're not anthropods. You're human. You're more intellectual. Keep with us. I'll pay you more to watch our gate. So they poor. They still in the shack. They working side by side in the field. Okay.
Right.
But because you're white, you're not really like them. I'll give you a couple of extra pennies. And I mean pennies.
Right.
You feel like you are a part of us. You're a part of our group. At the same time, those landowners didn't care about those poor white men either.
No.
You know what I'm saying? And you looking at this young man's family, just this general, working class, working people.
Right.
Nothing special. They trying to make a living. And that is one of the fears. That was one of the fears with the whole migration of African Americans up here from the South.
Right.
We're coming in droves to the north, to the factories, to Bethlehem Steel, Chicago, Cleveland, the whole Rust Belt. We're coming in droves to find jobs, and we're taking jobs in industry that the new immigrants are trying to get. You see. So, and if it wasn't one immigrant, it was another that was, against each other, because now you come to take my job. You had the Italians, now the Irish come to take the job. Now, so it was, it became color because it was made to, it's a social construct.
Right.
Race is.
Right.
A social division. It has nothing to do with genetics or, anything like that.
Right.
So, it's used to divide the poor so that we cannot stand up against the real enemies, which I believe in. Beyond, it's the conglomerate, those who own these resources.
Well, and that's where the capitalism, predatory capitalism comes in so heavy duty, and worse, I'm going to say, maybe worse than ever before. I mean, certainly there was the Gilded Age or whatever, so there was a lot of difference there. But I'm always saying this on this show, that we have the worst income and asset distribution in the call it the Western world, right? We have the worst that we had the worst in the 80s for sure. And probably it was increasing since the 70s. There was a middle class in the 50s and maybe the 60s, but then it started to get more and more divided, and then it's gotten worse and worse, so that now we have, it's so bad, 300 times a factory, CEO will be making 300 times what the guy on the floor, the worker on the floor, is making. 300 times. It's ridiculous. It's insane. And so, as you said, Zeneta, so during the COVID, these things are getting more and more clear too, because the billionaires, now we have more billionaires than we've ever had, and then poorer people are poorer than ever.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, poorer than ever. I mean, let's even take dollars away from it. We have people who don't have anywhere to live.
Right.
They don't
Right.
have food to eat.
Had their
Right.
basics.
They're not making a living wage.
Right.
Like I'm not saying,
What is
they need to be a billionaire, but they should be able to pay their rent.
Right. So it's
Simple.
I pay the rent
To
at
me,
all.
that's simple.
You should be able to live on this earth.
right.
Like that's all that people are asking for, right?
Right.
Is if I work 40 hours a week, that I'm able to pay my rent, pay all my bills, and buy groceries.
Right.
No, like how many people can do that in this country?
Right.
Right. That's the bare
Bare minimum. Yep.
Yeah, one paycheck, I mean, should be enough for you to pay your bills, right?
Mhm.
But it's not. You have to have a 40-hour-a-week job. You have to have a weekend job. You got to have an evening job in order to pay your rent.
That's right.
And even then, and then then there's problems. The medical. That people don't get medical care, can't afford the medical care. All the ways. All the ways that we need national health for sure.
Private industry. So they're making money off of that too.
Right. I'm thinking about also what's happened since 5/14 that has changed things. And I could say in either direction. How have our problems in Buffalo changed since 5/14?
How has it changed?
Or has it
I don't
changed?
think-
Or has it changed?
For me, I think that it's kind of on the same lines, like I said before, around COVID, right?
Uh-huh.
We see the need, right?
Right.
We know what the needs are, right? And in the short term, people are fulfilling those needs, right? Every day there's something going on Jefferson, right? People
Right.
are giving away things. There's all these, different centers popping up and offering all these services, mental health, and all the rest of that. And then what? Right? Like that's what it is for me. It's like, what are we gonna do? Like it's not
Different.
a sustainable program to sit at the corner of Jefferson and Riley and just give away boxes of food every day.
Right.
Like that's not fixing the problem, right? Like it's just not, and it's never going to fix the problem. So we have to figure out, and I think that right now, I'm one of those pie in the sky type of people. It's just who I am. I always think the best, and so I believe that things are shifting in the right direction. I really do believe that they are. And I think that, organizations, and our leaders in the Buffalo community are starting to see that these are things that have to become permanent, right? And we have to figure out how we're, not taking away a grocery store, but adding 5 more, right? We have to figure out how to get mental health services on Jefferson, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So I feel like people see that need, and right now things are moving in the direction of making sure that those things are permanent and not just, this, short term, I don't know, what do you want to call it?
Right.
Yeah. I always go back to education. I think, we're so used to, whether nonprofits, activists, we're so used to trying to cut down branches of issues, and fix, like you have symptoms of disease and you're like, okay, let me just get the fever down. Let me just keep you, hydrated. Let me just, and believe me, a lot of people, people will die more from symptoms than from the actual disease, right? Because they can't handle the symptom.
Yep.
At the same time, you have to still continue to treat the actual disease.
Right.
The disease of racism, the disease of economic inequity. It's a disease that we have to if the Black community on the east side of Buffalo was all middle class, it would be an issue of racism, but it wouldn't be all this issue of, it's a food desert. Oh, no, it's poor
poverty.
people.
Right.
You know,
The
you
poverty.
have seniors, majority, seniors in these different areas. And, it's other issues that are underlying that people are not able to provide for themselves the way we may want to, so that's where our conversations have to go. Why? Yeah, is it redlining? Has it been? Yeah, we need to talk about that. Talk about it across the lines. People from the North Buffalo, West Buffalo, East Buffalo, yeah, they need to be in the same room together, along with so-called officials, and to discuss those pieces. Why I'm mad at you? Why I'm afraid to go to, certain suburbs? Why are you never been to the East Side? Why have you ever been to the East Side except for March for Our Lives? You never been on Jefferson in your entire life. That's what Jill Hainsworth asked how many, was that during the march.
Right.
How many of you, which was majority, white population in the march, this is your first time on the east side of Buffalo, period. Majority of the hands went up. Why? And it's not just them, it's for us too, never been to certain parts of Western New York because we don't see us. And guess what? Some of us are, yes, very afraid. We know there's Ku Klux Klan up in Western New York. We know that there are active racists in Western New York. Now people believe it, nationally. Now people, so-called white people see, oh, this happens here. Yes, it happens here. So there's a conversation and a very, vulnerableness that has to happen to share what's really going on between the communities, to really talk about how we feel about different immigrants and so on taking over all the stores in our communities, and why don't we own anything anymore?
Right.
Because it wasn't always so. So we have those conversations amongst us. But I never had that conversation with Vicki. I never, we kind of do, but, because of the nature of our relationship, being with the Peace Center. But in the sense of, that's not a common conversation I'll have with another white person.
So this is where, need for frank conversations is exactly what you're talking about, and exactly what we need, and what we are working on, and what we're working on putting together. And we've had some healing conversations with Embracing Buffalo, which was very good. Very good. And there was some frank conversation in there. It depends on who's in the room where you're going to go with that. So it was frank, but it was more on the pain and on the healing from, and how to deal. How to deal was the big thing. So that is so important. And the other thing, so I wanted to bring up 2 points. One was what you said about Jillian Hainsworth, and what she said at the March for Our Lives. The other piece she said, when she said about how nobody, so many people had not been there, so many white people had never been there to that side of town. She says, then we need you to come back. We need you to come shop here. We need you to come be here. We need you to come be with us, because that was why Buffalo was chosen, because of the extreme segregation. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and so I'll tell you, I exclusively buying my gas over at Mandela Market. Always, every time, I'm like, the half a tank. I'm going by there anyway. stopping for some gas. But anyway, so that's one thing. So that's one thing we can do. But the other thing, I want you to talk about your project, which is such a wonderful project, yours and Zaire's. And back to, as Deidra was saying, the root causes. So please, if you would tell people about that.
That'd be great.
Absolutely. But let me just quickly say,
Sure.
I absolutely agree with what you ladies are saying, and that, yes, come to the east side of Buffalo and do your shopping. You know, there are some amazing stores along Jefferson, along Fillmore, along
and restaurant.
Broadway.
Yes.
And restaurants. You know, like, come hang out with us. And I'm going to just say a snippet about what that does for our community. That is them sharing their privilege with us, right? When white people show up in our communities, they don't just show up as, you know, we can allies, right? People throw that term around a lot, right? And for me, I want our allies to go a step further. I want you to share your white privilege with me, right? Like, I tell people all the time about Senator Kennedy and the way he shares his privilege with me. And I give them examples that, you know, Senator Kennedy travels a lot for work, right? And this man can be in, just last week, right? He was in Denver. And this week, I'm getting all these calls about, oh, I met your boss in Denver, and he told me to call you. That is what I'm talking about. You know, our allies have to just take it one step further. I need our allies talking about the amazing Black people they know and the amazing things that they're doing in their community behind their backs when they're not in the room. I need you to do that when I'm not around.
I do it.
That is sharing privilege, right? That is what we need more of, because that helps, right? So if, you know, some of our newfound white allies who came over for the March for Our Lives and they shopped over on Jefferson or over on Fillmore and they found some really awesome things, the one thing they can do is share their knowledge of what they found on Jefferson with their friends and with their families. That's what we need, right? We need buy-in from the larger community about what's going on the east side of Buffalo, and not just talking about, you know, the few bad things that happen over there, right? Right. And so, yes, let's talk about books. I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to say, totally.
Yeah, so definitely, I wanted to, you know, after, you know, 5/14, it was a lot. Right. It was, oh, goodness. Like, I won't go into that whole story. That could take up an hour or 3. But it was heavy on my son. You know, it was heavy on me. Of course. And our whole family. And, you know, and on the larger community, period. It was just, it was a lot. Right. Like, I get paid to talk about gun violence and racism. That's my job. Every day, that's what I do. And then, you know, it's on my doorstep now. Now it's in my house, and now I have to talk about it, you know, from a mother's standpoint, right? Not just professionally, but, you know, this is my kid, you know. And during that time, the weeks after, you know, it was hard for me to work. To like do my actual job, right? It was so hard. Of course. And so the truth is, like, I needed something to dig into, right? Like, I needed something good to come from, you know, what was happening to my son, right? I needed a distraction, honestly. That's what this book club came in at, because, you know, my days were filled with taking care of Zaire. I'm changing his bandages, and, you know, like, I don't know if any of you ever seen a gunshot wound up close. That was my first time, but that was traumatic. Yeah, of course. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And so that distraction came. The book club literally was a distraction, an amazing distraction.
Oh, wonderful.
And, you know, a lot of people, interviews that I've done, people ask me, well, how do we change this narrative of, you know, how do we fix racism? How do we, you know, do all these things? And I told them, I said, we have to start with kids. We have to educate children. young children, right? Yeah, we would love to start with an 18-year-old and start teaching them about racism and things like that. But if we start with the young kids, right, who are already have this innocence in them,
Right.
to where they don't think about racism, right? They just want a friend to play with,
Right.
right? That's where we start. We start with them because they are our teachers and they are our leader, right? They are my leaders, right? Because I'm
Right.
going to be old one day.
Right.
And so they're going to be the leaders, right?
Right.
And you're going to be the teachers and the business owners, and they're going to be the ones running these organizations. So if we start with the little kids, teaching them about diversity, basically. Like, that's what the book club is. It's
Right.
Zeneta and Zaire's book club, and we collected almost 15,000 books right now
Yay.
from people across the world who have sent us these books. And so we partner with Villa Maria College, which I am an alumni, and I'm also on the board of trustees at Villa Maria College. And I love Villa, and I knew that, Villa Maria College is actually the place where I took my first African American history class at. And so that's why I wanted to start it there, because like when I spoke to Congress and I said, the majority of what I've learned about African American history, I learned it in college, but I had to choose that class.
Right.
It wasn't just taught to me.
Right.
And so, learning what I learned in that course changed my life. It changed my life completely.
Sure.
And so, when we have books, right, that reflect the lives of Black people and African Americans in this country, we give our white friends and our white allies a window into our lives, right? And for Black kids, it's a mirror. And they see themselves and they're like, wow, I could do that, right? I'm reading about inventors and all these famous painters and all these, doctors and lawyers who are Black, and they've done all these great things. I can do that too, right? And so that's what Zeneta and Zaire's book club is all about. And, like I said, we've gotten almost 15,000 books. And my plan is to turn this into a sustainable program. I hope one day to turn this into a 501c3. I want this to be someone's job. I want them to make sure that we are getting books that feature Black people, Black families, Black kids in them out into the community, out into, community centers and libraries and in the schools and in the homes of people. And not just in the homes of Black kids, in the homes of white kids.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
We want parents reading to their children from books with Black kids in them. Because that's how we change the narrative, and that's how we change racism in this country. It has to start with reading, it has to start with education, and it has to start with our kids. And so I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to, the community around the world who have donated books to this. And I'm so excited this fall that we're going to get this, off the ground and going, and we're going to get books out to people, and it's going to be amazing. And so, I'm excited.
It is so wonderful. So usually another thing we want to do is always talk about how people can get more involved and how people can help, right?
Yeah.
So let's go around with that, and especially starting with the book club. What can people do? How can people help with that?
So people can, right now, I'm just accepting emails. So people can email me at zenetasbooklist@gmail.com, or they can just hit me up on Instagram. It's Zeneta Everhart. Facebook, it's the same. Or on Twitter, it's Miss_Everhart. And so that's how they can reach me. And then, of course, obviously, through Senator Tim Kennedy's office, that's probably the easiest way to reach me. And so I can just shoot you guys the links and all of that information about what we're doing. We are looking for volunteers to help us do an unboxing day because, like I said, we have almost 15,000 books, so we're going to need some help in the next couple of weeks to get those books opened and get ready for distribution. So, yeah. Definitely reach out and do it to help. Love the help.
Oh, that is a great way. And as far as frank conversations, can we talk a little bit about some of the avenues? Or, I think it's more perspective then, and there's been, first of all, I want to say there's been a certain amount of that, well, one, right along. So for all that we're saying people don't talk about it, well, some people don't talk about it, but some people do talk about it, and some people have been talking about it over and over and over for the centuries, right? You know? But as far as frank conversations, I think that, it really came to a head. Even back to 5/14, I was there the morning after, and of course it's crawling with media, and so I'm gonna, now maybe from certain people they were hearing, oh, city of good neighbors, but there were plenty of people who were saying, let me tell you about Buffalo, let me tell you about how deep the problems go here, so that started, and then so it has been happening somewhat. I mean, hopefully on Talking Peace is one place, and there are other places, and we have high hopes for some other frank discussions, and especially with some of the people, if you want to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on that, Deidra.
Oh, me.
Well, both of you. Both of you. I was just. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. I want to hear Zeneta's thoughts too.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Like I say, I want to see us, and I know it doesn't end here, but I would like to see a diverse group of people from the Buffalo communities in one room with a mediating, peaceful, person or persons that would help people to hear one another, and to talk about what's on our minds concerning race, what's on our mind, like what are we thinking, and how do we bridge the gaps, that has been historically, we all either was born or, placed or, kind of situated in these positions without, creating this divide. We just kind of perpetuate it because that's what we know, So how do we cross over, and how do we build a trust with one another to understand and bridge those gaps, because it's not just about shopping, in black or white or whatever community. It's talking about what we don't trust, because it is a trust factor. It's a trust factor for me going out to Orchard Park. It's a trust factor probably for some people going to Bissell, and Genesee. I'm saying it's a trust factor for me going to Bissell and Genesee, but I'm just
I'm going over there, but I hear you.
For example, that that needs why, and how do we, how do you feel about that, and how do we overcome that? That's the conversations that I want to see happen in a series. Whoever's willing, because I have learned from my personal experience with people, other nationalities, white people, what have you, having a personal conversation about how we feel about race, or what I thought when you first walked in the door. Well, I thought you was a Karen, or I thought you was Queen of the Nile, whatever. Well, why did we think that way? Why did we already have these preconceived thoughts? And once we got to know each other, we're the best of friends. But how do you kind of pass that notion, of those preconceived notions of who we think we're dealing with, so we can learn more about one another and really see more of the connection we have with one another. I want to see that.
Yes.
I love that. So
yes.
when I'm gonna put it out there. So when the West New York Peace Center gets that underway, just invite me.
Ooh, you know it. You know
I'm gonna put that out in the atmosphere and manifest it for you.
Then yes, 1,000.
That's what I want to see. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what? And for me, I do. I love, your idea of, more of a grassroots, natural type of, connectivity conversation around race and racism and things like that. But for me, and coming from the space that I come from, which is government, right, and politics.
Right.
And so for me, I want to see the breakdown of systemic racism, right?
Right.
And that's top down. That's,
Right.
built to the fabric of our laws, right? Like we were
Right.
just talking about redlining a minute ago, right?
Right.
So I want to see the breakdown of the school to prison pipeline, and hiring practices and things like that, because I feel like that is the only way that we're, education is a part of that legislation, right? That's the only way that we're going to fix the real issues and really be able to have an honest conversation about race when we're admitting that, we're excluding a certain group of people from applying for certain jobs, or, or for living in a certain area, or not, giving them the loan to buy a house in a certain neighborhood, or, for a certain amount of money. So when we start having those conversations, those are the conversations that I really want to have, right? Because that's how we fix this country. And that's how we start to admit the fault of America, right? America needs to apologize for slavery, right? Like they need to fix the wrong of slavery. And fixing the wrong of slavery, yeah, it would be great with reparations, but it would be really great if we were fixing our education system and making sure that people were getting hired equally and getting paid equally, right? And we're able to buy a house wherever they wanted to live, or get a bank loan for however much money that they can. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at, and I'm off my soapbox.
No, don't get off your soapbox. We need you on it. No.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes. So that is definitely, those are things that I would think, all of us would want to see, need to see, and need to happen. They need to happen because the time is now. The need is great, and the frank conversations need to be had. I just want to say, I can't be, can't express just how grateful we are for you to come on the show, Zeneta. And Deidra, I know all the work you're doing and making your time in your busy day for this show, which is, of course, it is your show anyway. So, I just can't thank both of you enough, and we're grateful. I am very grateful. It's what we started off with in the beginning. So I want to say, just thank you so much, Nyaweh. You could say Nyo. And this is Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so very much. Yay. Great.
That was beautiful.
Great.
That was beautiful.
That was beautiful. That was so beautiful.
Thank you for having me, ladies. This was awesome.